I am here. Chat on. It doesn't look right. It looks like too much light. Oh well. We got nobody in yet.
It's still recording.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
All right. All right, Keith's with us. Keith is with us. That still looks a little bright to me up there. There, that's better. Might have hit it a little too hard, but that looks better. I am here, says Keith. I am here. All right. Well, good, man. It's just me and you. That's all right. All right, here we are. It is Tuesday, March 15th. March 15th. That sounds good. That means halfway through March, and the Ides of March maybe are upon us. I don't know. Maybe I need to readjust that. There we go. Yeah, that looks better. All right, Inga's with us. Let's talk biochar. Yeah, I want to talk biochar. That's going to be sort of a hot topic here for a week or so, maybe even more, because biochar is it's sort of a it's not an amendment the way you would think of a mineral amendment. You know, when you need to amend the soil because let's say you don't have a certain amount of boron or a certain amount of calcium, something like that. That's not what it is. And I want to talk about that a little bit tonight. I had a pretty good webinar that I listened to today from some pretty smart people, I guess, because they all had PhDs, and they were talking about soils. And I think they went way too deep. I mean, you know, they were pitching a course that they have created that you can go to, and when you come out, you are a soil guru. And yeah, okay. I don't know as I want to be a soil guru. I need to know enough, but it goes really deep. It goes really deep. And I don't see the point in going that deep, you know, unless you're a PhD in something and you're supposed to know everything there is to know about that. I really don't need to know everything there is to know about it because I'm doing a practical thing here. You know, I'm just trying to homestead and make a gain off the homestead, grow the food. It doesn't really benefit me to, you know, talk to you guys about things that I don't think we need to know about. I just don't. But anyway, maybe I go a little further on it, and maybe I'll decide that hey, I do need to know more about it. But at this point, I'm holding that we don't have to know everything there is to know about this. I don't think it serves any purpose, but there are 4 things that are in the soil that I think we do need to know about. We've got bacteria, we've got protozoa, we've got fungi, that's plural for fungus. You don't say funguses. And we have, did I say bacteria, protozoa, fungus, and nematodes? Sometimes they call them nematodes, right? And I think that for our purposes, we can kind of focus on bacteria and protozoa. That's always presented itself as That's the main thing that's going on. And what builds soil is the process of having a lot of bacteria in the soil, a whole lot of bacteria. You know, bacteria is sort of, if you pay attention to programming on TV, you would get the idea that, ooh, bacteria bad, you know, bacteria is not our friend. But in reality, bacteria is our friend. There's a few types of bacteria that are not, but let's just focus on the ones that are in abundance in our environment. They're in our stomachs, they're in our soils, they're in our compost piles, they're in the stomachs of our animals, or the digestive tract of our animals. And of those types of bacteria, it's a long list of different bacteria that are in there, but together, and they do a function, and that function is they break down carbohydrates and proteins. They break them down. So without bacteria in our gut, we couldn't, in our stomachs, our gut, your gut is from here to here. Without bacteria in your gut, you couldn't break down anything. You would just chew it up, swallow it, and it would just come out chewed up and swallowed. You have to, the bacteria breaks down these things and releases the energy that's in it in the body so your body can use it. Does the same thing in the soil. The bacteria breaks down the organic material that's in the soil. So like leaves and the clippings from the last time you mowed, and you know, if you put peat moss in your soil, it's actually food for the bacteria. That's the whole idea. Compost is food for the bacteria. And then you have protozoa. Bacteria and fungi are kind of in the same camp. They seem to be like feeder fish. And the protozoa are the fish that feed on them. And they're not, neither of them are fish, but it's sort of like that. You know, like you have sharks, and then you have these massive schools of smaller fish, and the sharks go in and they eat one or two. And nematodes, I don't need to go into that. They're little animals, and they are an indication that when we look at a soil sample, when we see nematodes and we see them in the correct ratio, then we know that our soil is in balance. The nematodes are sort of like the little lamprey eels on fish. They kind of hang around and they're just feeding, right? And they provide us with the same thing that the protozoa provides us with, and it's their manure. They eat bacteria and they manure what becomes soil, right? What the bacteria does, though, the bacteria breaks down the organic material and releases it into the soil that'll be around roots, and you know, the soil and the roots, they're going to be close, and releases that energy and that nutrient so that the plant can take it up. And it took me a while to really understand that. But when you think about soils that are dead and you plant into them and you get germination, germination is not because of the fertility, it's because of the heat in the soil. You get germination, but then there's nothing there for that germinated seed to feed on. Then you have very, very poor growth, and you know, really spindly little plants that go up. And that's why they will plug in a fertilizer pellet, and the fertilizer does some of the same, it mimics the same thing as the bacteria does. Any organic material that is in the soil, it will have a chemical reaction, and it will break down anything that's in the soil and release it. The only problem about that is it's dangerous to nematodes and protozoa, also bacteria. It's also dangerous to bacteria. So the soil can never regenerate once you start pumping it with fertilizer. So remember, we talked last night about regeneration. If you have a coffee can that's full of soil and you kill it, okay, let's say you set it on top of the wood stove and you leave it there for a good long time and you heat everything out of it and it is totally dead. But then you take a little bit of live soil, put it in there, it will propagate. And some of the numbers that I heard today, you kind of wonder, you're a PhD, so I guess you can spit back information that you read in books and stuff. But you got to kind of respect some of what they say, or maybe a lot of what they say. There were times during this discussion where I thought, how do you know that? But we'll just take them at face value for the purposes of this discussion, I guess. This one doctor on the panel said that if you start with one bacteria in 24 hours, you could have 6 million. They propagate that fast, right? That fast. And it's very important to have lots of bacteria in the soil so that when you add organic material to it, they feed, propagate very easily. Okay, so are they dependent on the minerals that are in the soil, the bacteria? Dependent on it, no. But mineral in the soil, if it is way out of balance, it makes an unhealthy environment for them to live. So you may start with one bacteria, and at the end of 24 hours, you got 5, where you could have 6 million if you had a healthy environment for them. So that's why we want to do soil samples, and we want to know that our minerals that are in the soil are close. You could say, oh, they're perfectly balanced. Well, a lot happens in between rainstorms. A lot happens. So when we do soil samples, we're getting an idea. I don't think that it is going to be an exact science of what we have there in the field, but it is going to be an exact science of what is in that sample. I think that would be pretty good. Generally, if you have soils that go out of balance, they will go out of balance the same way year after year. So I'm not saying don't do soil samples every year. It'd be a good idea to do it. We don't do it near enough. But if you're deficient in calcium, then the next year probably you're going to be deficient in calcium again. All right, so I want to talk a little bit tonight about biochar and applying it. But before I do that, let's just talk about biochar again, why it is important to your soils. All right, so last night we said that, hey, in the farming business, we're not necessarily growing animals and plants. We should be growing soils, because if we grow soils, we're going to have good plants. We can grow out those crops, feed those crops to our animals, and then we'll have good, healthy animals. And if things are somewhere in the neighborhood of balanced, we should have good growth. We should have pest resistance, and we should have, I don't think you're going to have weed resistance, but you're going to have some balance, right, in your weeds to non-weed ratios. You're never going to say, oh, I'm totally balanced, I shouldn't have any weeds. I don't think that would be logical. Weeds, they're from a seed. You're in fertile soils. What, they're not going to grow in fertile soils? I think they are, right? So we make biochar, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between hardwood biochar and softwood biochar. There seems to be a huge difference just physically and the charge of it. Like Vendicti said last night, this is negatively charged and it attracts positives, right? Opposites attract, right? So we're gonna make it out of hardwood around here. That's just what we're gonna do. And this is going to provide a physical refuge for our bacteria, right? So let's say we're going to grind this up and we're going to squirt it with an inoculant that is high in bacteria. And how do you make that? We can go into that as well. If you have a good quality compost that you've made, or let's say you don't make compost, a lot of people don't, but you should. You get a good high quality compost. Well, a high quality compost would have a diverse spectrum of bacteria in it, wouldn't it? And you want that. You want diversity. You don't want just one or two types of bacteria. You want every color of the rainbow in there of bacteria. So how would you do that? Right? So in the environment that I live, there's probably a finite variety of bacteria, right? Probably. And maybe they give or take a little bit. But then you go to another town or another state or another country, and you up, you can close that door, please. You can pick you up a couple handfuls of something, like maybe decaying leaves from a windrow or a fence line, someplace that doesn't get a lot of tillage. Maybe go out into a forest and pull the leaves back and see that nice soil there, pull that up. Oh, get a whiff of that, take a Ziploc bag and throw that in. So you can be collecting bacteria from all over. Any place you go, you can pick some up. And I mean, like if you go into the city, even, there's bacteria there that would actually benefit you. That's somebody has, let's say they've grown mushrooms in their yard, and that fungi has attracted certain types of bacteria. Now, you're not going to really pull a soil sample and start looking at it under a microscope and say, oh, I don't have one of those, like collecting baseball cards. I don't think you'll really know, other than you'll see what the outcome is in the world that you're living in, the growing medium that you have around you, your homestead. It can really increase quite a bit. So let's say you have a really good, solid, diversified compost. And let's say you see some compost at the store that's from Oregon and you're in Michigan like me. Get it, because it's going to be different than the stuff that you have. It doesn't cost much. And then you see some, you start looking at packages. Ooh, this one's from Arizona. Well, what kind of compost do they have down there? I wonder what type of bacteria come from Arizona, right? Likewise, the compost pile that you have on your homestead, let's say that you put food scraps from that came up from Chile. Oh, definitely different bacteria. Definitely different, right? So you're adding that to your compost pile. Keep adding, year to year, you just keep adding. And to make an inoculant, you would take some of that out, put it in, ideally like a chunk of cheesecloth, something like that. Tie it off, make a great big tea bag, put it in. Ideally, if you had a big glass jar, if you had a glass jar that was like this big. But if you don't, let's say you have a trash can, there's going to be some bacteria in there anyway. Put it in the trash can, put some water, leave it out in the sun. And it's going to make, sometimes they call it barnyard tea, right? And you can use that in a sprayer to go through your garden, and you can spray it on foliar, right on the leaves. Certain plants do really well with it. Some of them don't like it so much. Tomatoes don't like it so much, I'm told, anyway. You can get an injector to put it into your sprinkler system. So you're sprinkling water and you're sprinkling bacteria into your environment out there. What does that do? That wakes up the protozoa, and they're like, hey, let's eat. So you're stacking the deck by doing that. But how does it apply to biochar? You spray down some biochar, you grind it up, and you spray it down. People have asked me, how small should we grind it? Well, I'd say the sizes of your hotels should be diversified. I think you should have big hotels and little hotels. So, you got different types of bacteria. Let's say this is a huge hotel. This is like the Trump Tower. You'd have little, real rich bacteria living in there because it's big. They just like to live in big spaces. But then you could have a little tiny chunk like this, and there'd be a small, group of bacteria that would live there. Maybe a different variety, prefer smaller spaces. And they would have refuge in there. And then this could even be ground into a powder. And bacteria are quite small. So let's say you've got a piece that's the size of a micron. You could probably get several thousand bacteria in there, and they'd say, well, this place it's not big, but it's nice. And when you grind it, of course, your coverage is going to be more. So you're going to be spreading out your bacterial little hotels everywhere. So that I can't really say on that. I think we have a grinder here, and it's got a screen in it that is 3/8 of an inch. So everything that we grind comes out probably smaller than this, if you can see this. It's smaller than that. And then what we'll do is we'll add it to the compost pile, mix that all up, let it sit, and spread that wherever. Now, we want to talk about applications and different ways to apply biochar. But I think before we do that, we want to talk about where it's used, right? So obviously, we can mix it in with compost, and then we can spread it on our garden. You can spread it on your lawn. You can spread it on your fields. You can spread it on your grow areas. You can put it in potted plants. And then the next question is, well, how much should you put down per acre? And that is something that you can think through and decide what you want to do. And I don't know what the best way to do that is, because here's the way this works. Like, I'll give you an example of what we had going on here. I'm telling you this because we started making biochar, and I heard how great it was and all this stuff. But I don't know. You have a garden from year to year. Was this year way better than last year? Kind of hard to know, because the last year's garden is not here anymore. When we planted last year, did we plant too early, too late? It was very subjective. All right. So it's really hard to know. But I know the fertility in the garden is leaps and bounds past where it was when we first moved here 18 years ago. But the lawn out in front, if you ever come here and you're coming up the driveway, it's like a sweeping driveway that comes uphill, and off to your right, you'll see the barn, and the lawn there. I know as an organic grower, I'm not supposed to be into lawns, right? I should have like row crops out there, but I don't, and I like lawns, and I'm into them, and I like mowing lawns, so too bad. But when we got here, that lawn, it had some grass in it, and I would say it would be like 50% grass, and not very good, just little knobs of grass here and there. There was some areas that were kind of filled in, but then there was vast areas out there that was just lichen and moss and open, looked like salty ground. It looked salty to me. It had white film in it, and I don't know if it was salty. I never put my tongue down there. I never wanted to. maybe it was mold. Maybe it was white mold. I really don't know what it was. I wasn't all that interested. I had other things that were on my plate that I thought were more important than my lawn out in front. But if you didn't mow that lawn, it sort of looked like, oh, it looked bad. It just looked really messy, like nobody lived here. And for 1 year, I said, you know what, we're not going to mow the lawn because we're organic and we shouldn't be mowing the lawn. It's a waste of money. And da 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 da. And I said, we're going to just graze it with goats, let the cows out there and all that stuff. Well, the soil out there was so fragile that if you walked on it, you would break it open, right? You could not drive on it with a vehicle. It would just leave a track the whole way. And it was an eyesore. It was literally an eyesore to me. Every time I came up, I'd see it. I didn't like it, and it made me feel like I got to do something. And then I started making biochar. I started mixing in my compost. I make a lot of compost. I really like making compost. And I like it because it gut checks with me, you know. I can't explain to you all the things about compost that are good, but when I'm making it, I enjoy it, and when I'm spreading it, I enjoy it, and I feel as though it does good things for the grass here. And although, you know, lawns get a bad rap out there because they say we waste so much gasoline and time and all that stuff on it, I think that we want to bring the entire fertility of the homestead up. I don't want to just, you know, like the garden is fertile, but the hell with the grass. That doesn't make sense. I want the entire piece of property. When rain comes down, I want it to hold. I want the soil to be able to process the mineral that comes down in the rain. When the snow goes away, like we lost a lot of snow today, I can see green grass out there, and I can see a lot of green ground. Very interesting. I want that grass area to be resilient and be able to take some abuse. Same thing with the hay fields. We cut hay off of them, but then we graze them. So they have to be tough. You know, if you're going to graze cattle over them, if it's just a thin layer of soil and then the roots go down into just dry sand, and boy, that's fragile. And when you have wet ground out there and the cattle's out there walking around, they'll just make a mess out of it. You can't have that. You want to build very resilient and tough ground. So if we get a tremendous snowstorm, tremendous rainstorm, the ground can handle it. It can handle it. It's not going to wash away. That lawn to the right of the driveway coming up, that would happen. There was trenches out there that if you were running and you stepped in it, you could twist your ankle off. And then we'd fill them in, and then they'd trench out again, and you'd be mowing along, and all that, boom, you'd go down into it. Well, I started spreading compost out there with biochar in it. I have never seeded out there. I just never did. And it's not like I wouldn't or shouldn't, or, you know, I just never did, because the first year that I spread compost out there with biochar in it, I had a noticeable difference that year. And, you know, I'd be mowing it. I would think, this looks different. This looks a lot different. I'm looking at the grasses, and they had much broader leaves on them. When I would mow before, the grass was dry. Even if it had rained shortly before that, it would just, when I cut it, it would make a row of cut grass that was dry, right? Now I'm mowing it, and if I let it get too long, it'll clog the mower up because there's so much moisture in it. I get done mowing it, and it doesn't turn brown on me, even if it's dry. Right? So that means that the soil is retaining moisture, right? because of the biochar, right? It's still out there. This is not going to go away. This will not. This is already broken down. So if you go out there into my lawn and start looking around real close, you will find biochar. And where it is now, 10 years later, it looks like a decent lawn. It really looks like a decent lawn. I am not into a monoculture lawn. I don't. I mean, I want weeds out there. I want everything. I want like 15, 18 species out there. You want it covered. You want all those species working together. I like a lawn, but I don't like a lawn that is like perfectly cut, single species, and then let's go over it with dye so it looks nice and green. I'm not into that. I'm not into any fake stuff like that. I think it serves a purpose because I want the fertility to come up over the entire outfit here, not just the gardens, not just the flower gardens, not just the fields, the grow fields and stuff. You want the entire fertility to go up. And some of that I can't explain why I feel that way, but I just do, and that's what I'm going to do, and that's what I have done. So that's one example of where I've used biochar that I could see the difference quite quickly. Within a month, I could see it. And I think in that case, it had a lot to do with water retention. I really do, right? But now the soils out there are much deeper, and there's a lot more life out there. And don't tell my kids that it's okay to drive on the lawn, because it still ain't okay to drive on my lawn. Have a big problem with that. When you have a farm, people come on the farm, and for some reason, there's a gravel driveway, and they will pull off onto the lawn. And it's like, I don't want to block the driveway. Well, then pull off to the side of the driveway, but don't pull on the grass. That's the grass. You don't park on the grass. Happens all the time. But I'm going to build a split rail fence coming up that sweep, because people have a tendency to come halfway up the driveway and then just veer off into the grass, and it just makes a mess. It makes an absolute mess. I don't get it. When I was a kid, if I drove on the lawn, my father would have a scalp. He would scalp me for that. But okay, so what's the other application that I'm talking about that I use around here? I got a story to tell about that as well. If I just tell you, well, biochar is good because I read about it in a book, and so-and-so on the internet says it's good, that only goes so far. The other application is, we have raised pasture poultry here for a long time. There were 2 years, my son Joe and I were talking about this today. He was the chicken guy. He was the guy that primarily took care of the chickens out on the field. We had a lot of chicken tractors going, and there were 2 years where we could not get the chickens to grow at a rate that we felt was going to make us any money. But we had all these customers, and some of our chickens were going out 10, 12 weeks, and then we were barely getting a 4-pound bird out of them. And you're using so much feed, and then you do the numbers at the end of the year, and it's not good. We also had a high amount of mortality on the field, and there was more of it than I was told, actually, because you go out there and there's dead chickens, and they're skinny, and they seem to have a messy butt on them, so they obviously have diarrhea. And in their manure, you see that there's blood in the manure, and we've got 30 chicken tractors going, and half of them are sick. It's like, what do you do? Well, back then, I was a big believer in certain institutions, and those same institutions would like to come here because we were doing things differently, and they like to see it. They like to see the way we were doing things. There was a certain PhD that ran the chicken department at that institution. I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to throw stones. But he told me that, oh man, you've got to get this product. You've got to get this product. And the way that you give it to the chickens is through their watering system. So you would, if you're going to use bucket waterers on top of the tractors, then you need to just put some in each one of the buckets when you fill them up with water. The problem is with that, if it gets them healthy, you got to wait 2 weeks before you process them because that product is detrimental to human beings. It's detrimental to the gut flora and fauna in human beings, right? So what was the problem we were struggling with? It was the scourge of chicken production in some parts of the country. It's called coccidiosis, right? Coccidia is a protozoa. It is a species of protozoa, right? It's called coccidia. And when you get them out of balance, you wind up having coccidiosis. When there gets to be too many of them, and they all start having lots and lots of bacteria for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, after a while, there's no bacteria left, or your numbers start to dwindle to the point where the coccidia protozoa start to embed themselves in the chicken's cellular structure and actually eat the chicken. They have a spear on the front of them, and they spear it into cells, and then they suck the juice out of the cells, and that's what they live on. And you see chickens that have bloody manure and all kinds of things like that. Really bad deal. And there was a time when we said, well, I don't know if we can do this because it's just so bad. I actually looked at a journal at the library, and it was a journal from like 1875, and they were talking about coccidiosis. And it said something like, taking coccidiosis head on, many have tried, like that. It's sort of like telling you, hey, we've been looking at this for a long time. It's bad, and there's not much you can do. But modern science came out with a product called Improlium. That is the generic name. And then it's sold under several different brand names. But it's like, at the time we were buying gallon jugs of it, it was like $45 for a gallon jug. We had to buy this device called a dosatron, and it would inject a little bit into the water supply continually. And yeah, it would knock that coccidia out of the chickens. It would prevent them from getting it, but at what cost? And it did weaken the chickens too. They were not as hardy. They just overall were not as hardy. So there was 2 years there where we had a really poor crop. Then entered what would have been the third year. And in the wintertime is when we started making biochar. I think it would have been right around this time when we made our first load of biochar. And I made it in a 50-gallon drum with a 30-gallon drum inside of it. It was the very first one we built. I did the burn, took the barrel out of it, looked at it, and I was like, hey, this is cool. Took some out. It was long pieces of wood. It rang, and I come up to the house and had dinner. I mean, it was before daylight savings time, I'm sure, because it was dark. And the kids are all little, so they weren't out with me. And I'm telling Jill about this biochar. And then I went out after dinner, and where I dumped it, it was gone. All there was some ash. And I thought, somebody took my biochar. But how could that be? I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a lot. It was maybe like a gallon of it, or maybe 4 gallons of it, but it was gone. And the next day I came out and I looked at it and said, son of a gun, that stuff combusted. So it must have had some spark in it, and it caught and just vaporized. And there was nothing but a little bit of ash there. And it was in the snow. So the snow didn't put it out. So it was that was an interesting story. But the next day we did another burn, and then the kids were around. Where we did it was right in front of the Clearspan building. And back then, we used to get chickens this time of the year for spring chickens, and we would grow them in chicken tractors in the Clearspan. And we had elaborate setups to keep them warm, and but we'd still get coccidiosis. We'd get it in the brooder. They would have it at 4 weeks old. They would have coccidiosis. So this one year, we didn't have the dosatrons going because it's still cold out, and their water would freeze. I did not see any signs of coccidiosis, but we thought that, yeah, it's coming. They're going to have it. My buddy there from the university was saying, oh yeah, that's the way it is. Around here, it's in the soil. You can't get rid of it. Cattle struggle with it. Plenty of animals struggle with it. A lot of farmers struggle with it. They sell a lot of that amprolium in this neighborhood. So we had made this biochar, and it was in a location where we were near these chickens. And for some reason, this stuff is weird. It's weird. When you have it in your hand, you do things that you wouldn't normally do. Like if you picked up a piece of cow dung, you would not put it to your face to smell it. You would just not be concerned with the way it smells. But for some reason you do with this, or maybe tasting it, or breaking it up, or hearing the way it rings, something like that. It's odd stuff. And so I don't know why I did it, but I took a chunk and I chucked it in with the chickens, which would have been probably about 4 or 5 weeks old at the time. And there was 2 groups. One was closer to us than the other group. Now, if you throw a penny in there, they'll pick it up and try and play keep away. But after a while, they'll all try it, and then they'll just leave it. They'll forget about it. Threw a piece of biochar in there, and they were doing the same thing. They were running around with it, but I noticed they were breaking it up. And I noticed a little while later, it's gone. So they not only broke it up, but they ate it. So I threw more in. Now, you guys, watch this. They eat biochar. And then I remember thinking of something that I'd heard when I was stationed over in Japan. I worked nights there for a while, and there'd be this odd smell. And people on the base would say, oh, that's the crematorium over there. They burn people. They burn everything. And then they take those ashes and they spread it on the vegetable fields. And that story went around. It went around. I mean, and I don't know if it was true, but the story flashed in my mind. Charcoal, good. Huh. I just got this feeling like charcoal maybe is good. And then in the past, we'd had naturopathic type things go on here where, you would take a capsule that has charcoal in it, activated charcoal, and that was supposedly good. They had toothpaste that was activated charcoal toothpaste. It was supposed to be good for your gums, and you brush your teeth and you have a mouthful of black stuff. But hey, if it's got to be good if it looks like that. And so I got to thinking, maybe this is good for the chickens, and not much more came of it. But then a week or so later, we were moving the chickens out onto the field, and the kids help. We will pick all the chickens up, we'll put them in chicken crates, and then we walk them out to the field and let them go in the chicken tractors. And it was Joe that said, hey, are all these chickens the same age? And I said, yeah. I knew they were because I picked them up from the post office. And he says, these ones are way bigger. And we're like, wow, I wonder what the story is there. And I don't think we put it together until they were out on the field. And we were out there in the sunlight, this group of chickens, it was a perfect controlled, it was accidental, but it was a perfect controlled experiment because these groups of chickens in these chicken tractors, 75 per tractor, they looked really good. These ones, they look like they got coccidiosis, and we've got to get the torrid going to them, the amprolium going to them soon, or we're going to have problems, right? If you stay out in front of it, you're okay. And as things progressed, this group was doing so much better. We processed them like 2 weeks before this group. And then it dawned on somebody, hey, weren't those the ones that we gave all that biochar to? It's like, yeah. And so now it's time to do some testing. And so we just kept doing it. We kept giving biochar to some of them and others not. And sure enough, it became really obvious that the biochar was preventing them from getting coccidia. They were not getting it. So I called my buddy at the university and I said, have you ever heard, or at the, have you ever heard of this? Have you ever heard of biochar? He says, yeah, I've heard of biochar. I said, well, I fed some to my chickens, and the group that I gave it to are not struggling with coccidia, but the other group is. Now, before you call up a guy, or at the time, guy's a PhD in chicken world, and I'm thinking, before I call him and I say this, I'm going to make sure that we've got our facts straight here. And so when I finally did call him, it was a very serious call, and I thought he was going to say, I'll be right up, I'll drive right up from the university. Instead, he says to me, well, make sure you have a backup plan, have plenty of cord on hand. I got to go, Mark. I'll see you. I have never talked to him again since that day. And prior to that, he said, oh, no, call me by my first name. And you put my number on speed dial, he says. I'm not kidding. And I still have it. I still have his phone number. But I've not called him since because I could not understand that behavior. I felt like, hey, we've discovered something that keeps us from needing to put this chemical into the water. And therefore, that chemical is not going on my field, therefore, is not going on into the groundwater. That seems like a good thing to me. And yet he acted really weird on the phone, like, make sure you have a good backup plan. I'll see you, bye. And I thought, gee, is it because I mentioned Mother Earth News and he thinks I'm a hippie or something? I don't know. I did not know, honest and true, I did not know why it went that way. But I kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, well, I'm going to use it. And then I have another friend that is a veterinarian, and we talk. He's also a GI. He's a serviceman, and we talk about things. Like we talk about things. There's a lot of things that we can talk about. We're talking, and I said, "Do you know this guy?" And he kind of, yeah, I know him. I said, well, what the hell is his problem? And I told him what happened, and he says, you don't really get this, do you? I said, guess I don't. And he explained to me that when you work for one of those institutions and you really want job security, you go with the company line. And the company line is push pharmaceuticals. That's the company line. Why is that the company line? Because it's the pharmaceutical companies that make donations to those institutions. Lots of donations, big donations. And in return, the the people that are professors there will say yes to pharmaceuticals. And if there's some, some cure to coccidiosis that looks like this, that you make for very little money, very few people know about biochar compared to the pharmaceuticals. That's a bad thing, because there's no way that I have to pay anybody for that other than the man that I bought the wood from, and maybe the guy at the junkyard that I bought the materials to build the retort from. That's it. I don't have to pay any pharmaceutical companies, right? And they have a lot of money, right? I'm sure they don't want things like that getting out. Anyway, we've used it since, and there was a time when I thought, I don't really think we can be in the pastured poultry business, because number one, we have terrible problems with predation here in northern Michigan, and number two, coccidia is so bad in the soil here. I don't see it. We're not getting a good conversion from the feed that we're buying to usable, sellable meat, and we were thinking this isn't going to work. And if we are running up a bill every year of $500 on Corid or Improlium, and just putting that stuff in the groundwater that we drink, I just didn't sound good to me. It just didn't. So when we discovered why, and my vet friend explained to me how the whole thing works, and why when we give them biochar, we're providing a place for their bacteria, their gut bacteria, to get in and hide from the protozoa. And then let's say you have a speck of biochar in their gut, or let's say you have a steady stream of it going through, because we grind it really fine and just top dress their feed with it. So they've got it in their gut. And like I said, you could have one bacteria in there, and in 24 hours, you could have 6 million. But they can't all fit in there. So some of them get kicked out, and outside the doors of the hotel, well, the protozoa are waiting for them. But the protozoa are getting fed, and they are doing what they're supposed to do. They're keeping the bacteria in balance. The chicken stays healthy. The chicken processes their food. Voila, we have a good situation going on from biochar, right? And we can stack the deck from there, right? We can take this, inoculate it with bacteria, and then that chicken is taking that bacteria in. It becomes part of their gut bacteria. And then now here's, two birds with one stone. Here's the second stone. Those birds are taking this in, they are inoculating it with their own gut bacteria, and then eventually they're going to manure it out. And they manure it out right to the ground. The bacteria that is already in that, biochar fecal soup is protected. So even if they manure it out right in full sunlight, it's protected. It's in a little spaceship, you can step on it, you can mow over it, you can have full sun, you can wash it out with a heavy rain, but it's still going to be in that little speck of biochar, still propagating, still pressing on. Once these hotels get full, it's hard to evict the bacteria. It's hard to get them out. Protozoa can get in there too, but mostly it's going to be bacteria. It's conducive to bacterial propagation for some reason, and I think that has to do with the electrical charge. It's negatively charged, like Vendicti said last night. I think I can't prove that. Maybe I don't know how you would prove it. I don't know. So those are two incidents where I did this myself. I applied it to that lawn, and I saw a dramatic increase. And if you look at it now, it's beautiful. To this day, we make biochar, we grind it, and we top dress the feed for our pastured poultry. And if we don't, if we don't, let's say last year we kind of struggled with it a little bit. I didn't get the biochar burner going. I thought we had enough to get through. There had been a couple of years where I made, load, and bagged it up. And it was down at the greenhouse, and there was big bags of biochar already ground, already in Ziploc bags. I don't know how many quart they are, but they're big. They're like a pillow. They look like a standard size pillow, Ziploc. And I did not inoculate that stuff. But if it sits there and it's got moisture in it, there's bacteria in the moisture, and it inoculates itself. I mean, it becomes a place where bacteria will say, hey, let's go in here. This looks nice. Let's go in here. And then they just grow. So you'd look in the bag, you'd look at from the outside, and you'd see, uh-oh, I got something going on in there. A little bit of green, looked like kind of moss growing on the inside. Open it up. Doesn't smell bad. Smells kind of good, actually. So we just fed it to the chickens, and it was fine. But there was a couple times where we ran low or out. We ran out. And Rachel said, we've got coccidia. We need biochar. And my old retort was in pretty rough shape last year. And so what I did was I ran to the store and I bought lump charcoal. And you can do that. You can do that. It is not the same as this in that when they make lump charcoal, they want to leave some of the distillates in there. So like very, very commonly they use softwood, right? Because when you cook with it, you get that smoky flavor, but when you burn it, when you burn this, if I take a bowl of this, let's say, and I did this. I made a video of it. I have a container that's cast iron. It used to be an old sausage press, and I put a handle on the top of it, and it's got these little legs, so it doesn't sit right down on the floor. And there was a little hole in the bottom of it, and I would fill it with biochar. I would squirt some rubbing alcohol on it and light it, and had that in the house while we were working on the hearth, right, for the wood stove to go on, because it got cold and we needed some sort of heat in the house, while you were in here during the day. And I thought, well, this will work until I get the wood stove hitched up, and it did work, and there was no smell. You could smell the alcohol, for momentarily, but then you would not smell wood at all, because there's no distillates in it. But if you do buy like lump charcoal from the store, if you're going to use it for your chickens for coccidiosis, I would just crush it up, like put it in a feed sack and step on it or drive over it, and get the pieces small enough that the chickens can actually eat it. They will peck at it and take chunks off. But I would inoculate it for sure. I mean, you're really stacking the deck when you do that. If you make some compost tea and spray it down. If you make compost tea and you get serious about your procurement of various bacteria from all over the country. I mean, when you guys come here for Tribe Day, you should take a baggie. That's what I'll do for fun. I'll bag up a whole bunch of our Baker's Green Acres compost and just give them out as free samples. And then when you get home, put it in water and put it out in the sun. Make some tea out of it. You could put it smaller and put it in like a sun tea jar thing. And I tell you what, it would not be a bad idea to take a shot of it. Honestly, it wouldn't, because then you're loading your gut with bacteria that you wouldn't have otherwise. That's a smart thing to do, actually. They say that we have about 3 pounds of bacteria in an average human being from here to here. And why shouldn't that bacteria be extremely diversified? Now, it would be if you were getting, you're going across town to this farm and you're getting vegetables. No, don't wash them off for me. That's okay. I'll just brush the dirt off them. That's good enough. You want that. You definitely want that. And then you're getting some out from this farm over here and some from this one. And so you're loading your gut with a lot of different types of bacteria. Along those lines, I guess I'm not supposed to give medical advice, but when you take an antibiotic, maybe I shouldn't because I'm not sure about what I'm talking about. But there are some medications that will, and I'm not sure what they are, so maybe I'll just shut up on that. Some medications will knock your bacteria down, and that's not good. And then you have to rebuild that. So even if you're not sick, you should always be stacking the deck with bacteria. Always doing that. That way, as soon as something goes down, you got plenty of bacteria to release the nutrients in that. And if you want that body to last 200 years, you need to do that, right? What was I going to say? Putting a little bit of soil in a capsule and sending that down is not going to hurt you. It's a good idea. I had something that I was going to say that I thought was pretty important. Anyway. Okay. Just a little bit of gee whiz stuff here about the retort and the program of making biochar on a regular basis. I would really like it if everybody in this tribe says, hey, I'm going to build one. I'm going to bag that stuff up. I'm going to throw a sticker on it. I'm going to call it Nancy's Miracle Biochar and sell that stuff online. I would be, it would warm my heart if you did that. Or if at least you start making it and using it on your own property, and then tell us how great it worked. So I think maybe Thursday night we're going to sit down with the pad here, and I'm going to draw out how this process works, and maybe have some pictures to be able to show you guys what our retort looks like. If you want, I just posted a video on my personal Facebook page, and I showed a few things. The way the program's going right now, my kids are running it, a 12-year-old boy and a 10-year-old boy. And making regular biochar is it's like finding eggs out in the yard. It's sort of like an Easter egg hunt. It's fun. They take it apart in the morning and they're like, wow, look at this. Well, yesterday, they wanted to get creative, and they said, so they start looking around for carbon-based things that they can turn into biochar. So if you're a 10-year-old boy and a 12-year-old boy, you start, thinking, how about this? How about this? So I got a request for, what about this cow head? Can we put this in here? So we have one of the beef that we knocked down this winter had a nice rack on him, and used it a lot. And we took the head off, we take the cheeks off, and we take the tongue out. But then generally it just goes to the dogs, and they'll cart it around and chew on it and get everything that they can get off of it. And then sometimes it'll go in with the chickens, and they'll take the little tiny pieces of meat off of it. But this one went in the biochar maker, and I brought some samples up from it, and I hope it shows up really well. But you see that's an eye socket right there, and you see how shiny this is. It almost looks like I sprayed it with urethane or something, but I didn't. It's just, I got got stuck in the chair here. It's just that a piece of wood, like if you looked at a piece of wood block, it would not be shiny before it goes in the retort. But this piece of bone, if you were to look at this and it had nothing on it, you know, no scraps of sinew or anything like that on it, it would be shiny. Why is it shiny? It's because the porosity of bone is very tight. So it's so tight that it looks shiny. That's how tight it is. So it makes really good biochar because it's really dense. And this is like a, this is like microsing someplace. You can fit so many bacteria in just this one chunk of biochar. It's unbelievable. And it will have certain properties that wood won't have because it's bone, right? But this, may seem as though it's, let's see, I'll tap it with something so you can get an idea of, see, it kind of rings. But if I have to, if I needed to, it'll break. Breaks very easy. I didn't want to break it. I wanted to show it off like that. Just that eye socket. And in the video that I made, the skull was there, and I thought for the video it'd be fun if I break it open and I could take the bullet out to show you. But too hot, the bullet was, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything. It was a jacketed bullet. I would think I would have found something, but I didn't. And then this, look at that. That's that horn. The other one, I did break it in half, and it broke fairly easy. This would have been full of meat. I don't know how well you can see in there, but that real dark spot there is actually a tunnel. It goes in. It goes way in. So on a cow, if you break one of these off or cut one off after you've butchered the cow, it's full of meat. It looks like marrow. I don't think it is marrow, but it looks like marrow. But it's meat, all right. And now all that meat was to a bone what sap would be to a piece of wood. It's distillate. It just needs to go away. And the high heat will take it out. But see, carbon doesn't burn. Well, that's not true. It does burn, but when it's it does not gas off is probably a better way to say it. It doesn't gas off. So gassing off, I may have just opened up a can of worms with that. But if you ever look at you strike a match and you look at it, you will notice that the flame is actually above the match, right? And right around the match, there's this like force field that you can actually see through, but you can tell it's hot. If you stick your finger in there, it's hot. And the match is gassing off, and as that gas that's warmer rises, heat rises, right? As it rises, it gets into the flame and it burns. That's really where you get that flame from. Observe a candle sometime. It's pretty obvious on a candle. All right. So really interesting stuff, I thought. So the last thing that I saw out there by the biochar burner was a possum. So I reckon I'll be able to show you a gassed off possum. That'll just be so. The two boys that are doing this right now is Frank and Jim. But when we went into the biochar production business, the other boys, my older boys, my second two boys, it was Joe and Sam, and they would have been, like 14 and 12, right? And it wasn't like they were into it. It was just, that's what we were doing that day. But they found ways to get innovative in that. And there was a neighbor that stopped by. We don't see much of him anymore, but he stopped by and he says, I guess I told you about this. I hit a beaver down by the swamp there, and thought maybe your boys would want it. And they said, sure, we'll take it. And he said, okay, well, it's down there. I didn't pick it up and bring it with me. You're going to have to go get it, right? So they went and got it. For one reason or another, they were going to skin it and eat it, but they didn't. I think its guts were squishing out. They just lost interest in it. It sat around for a while, and it was kind of gross. I said, you guys got to get rid of that thing. Can we make biochar out of it? I said, I guess so. Make biochar of everything else. So they put it in, and sure enough, I mean, you could see there's a way to do it. They'll put it at the, they want it at the top of the inner retort, so there's no pressure on it, and it just gases off, and then you have an animal that is just completely black, and it's very light. There's no meat left on it. There's just carbon. So a little carbon beaver, right? So I'm sure we're going to have just a little carbon possum, because there's a dead possum down there for some reason. Real interesting. So around here, we generate a lot of bones, and everybody has a shot at them. Like Jill gets her first shot at them. She can make bone broth out of them. But if, cows have a lot of bones, and we'll sell a bunch of them, but eventually they got to go. And so they'll go in with the chickens for a while. They'll take meat off. They'll go into the dogs. And eventually they just wind up in a pile, and they go into the biochar burner, and they become really good quality biochar. So along the lines of some of the biochars that are out there, this came up last night. Somebody said, well, it's so cheap, I don't see how you could make any money with it. Not all biochar is created equal. So in this case, we have a very dense bone char, right? Very dense. That's why it's shiny, because the pores on it are very, very close. Even this, I mean, it has an individual shininess to it that I don't know is picking up. It's showing on this camera very well, but it's very, very dense. And this is heavier, lots heavier than wood, a lot heavier. If I used softwood like pine, oh, it's dust. It just turns to dust. It's very, very, very light. And what that indicates is your surface area in there is not very good. And a lot of times pine will just burn up because it's got pine tar in it, and it seems to combust, and it winds up being gone. So you see products being advertised as biochar, and I've looked at some of them, and what they look like is wood chips that have just been flamed to turn black, and then I don't know, they must run them through some chamber where there's inert gas, and it just puts them out. And every now and then you'll see one when it flips over that, hey, that's not burned through all the way. That's still got distillates in it. And when you pick that stuff up and you smell it, it's like, whoa, this is still this is still pretty active stuff. There's a lot of distillates in that. That should be your clue of how it is made. That's why we kind of stress biochar that is made in an oxygen deprived environment is good quality biochar. They do have progressive machines that will put out blackened or black chips, small. They run them through a grinder. I don't know. I don't know what kind of results people get with that. We don't see that stuff here, but I do see it for sale certain places online, and it's usually like under $5 a pound. I've even seen some that was $149 for a cubic yard, which I thought was, wow, you can't make anything you can't make a cubic yard of anything for $149. But they were selling it, and they were talking about semi-loads coming to your farm and dropping it off. Let me know how that works out. But I don't gut check on that right off. I really don't. And I think that if you want good quality biochar, I am kind of slamming it, aren't I? Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe it's the best thing since canned beer. But I got a bad feeling about that. And one of the reasons why we have to be careful when we add wood chips to our soil is because it requires nitrogen to break down. So you can take nitrogen from your soil to break down those chips. So you have to be kind of careful because your plants, you don't want your plants competing for nitrogen. You want them to get all they need. And if you've got this action going on there where the chips are taking up a lot of the nitrogen, that's a bad situation. Now, can you work around that? Oh, sure, you can work around anything, I think. So what would you do? I'd probably inoculate the chips with heavy bacteria. Let's say you use them in the row in between your vegetable rows as a walkway. Hey, they're not going to be there forever. Walk down there with a sprayer and put some sun tea on them and get them going, because they will break down and become part of your system there. Wood chips are good. I really like wood chips because they add mineral to your biosystem there that comes from deep down in the soil. All right, I've been yakking and I haven't even been looking at the chat. Notice I haven't had my glasses on. So I've gotten my point across. I think that's really what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about ways of application, right? So giving it to chickens, putting it in compost, spreading it on your lawn. Those are two ways. Could you crunch it up, spread it on your lawn, inoculated? Yes, you could. Could you spread it on your lawn uninoculated? You sure could, but it wouldn't be as good, I don't think. What about other animals? Cattle won't eat this. But if I crush this up and I put it in something else that they will eat, then they will eat it. Like I could turn this into a paste, and I could put it on their hay bales and they would eat it. They would eat it. Would that be good? Yeah, it'd be good for them. Or like my milk cows come in to get milked and they get like a pound of sweet feed. It's not really sweet feed, it's goat feed actually. And I can crunch some of this up and put it in there, and it'll just go down with everything else. And then they're going to take it out there and they're going to deposit on the field. Nothing like the chickens, because they're just going to be depositing in here, but it's better than nothing. It's way better than nothing. What about pigs? I've made videos before where I take a bag of this stuff out and drop it to them, and gone. All you hear is crunch, crunch, crunch. They just eat it. By the way, I did butcher a pig today. I usually like to start off by telling you what I did for the day, but Joe and I did videos today, had a lot of discussion, and then right after lunch, boom, knocked down a 600-pound sow that was the last of the three 50% Mangalitsa, 50% Hereford. Real nice personality on those girls, but they just weren't very good moms. They just weren't. So a 600-pound sow that's given me quite a few babies. Not as many as she should have, but she gave me quite a few babies. And now we're going to make sausage and other things out of her, and she will wind up giving me even more. So I really appreciate her and her sisters. They did right by us, and they're going to continue to do right by us. So having that ability to process animals is key. It is key. I did not want her to get pregnant again, and I could not get her out of the pen. I certainly didn't want to spend um, the time trailering one animal an hour and a half away to get processed, where we got that job done in about an hour. So now she's down on the table. Half of her's on the table. The other half I broke into sections, and we're going to break it down for a customer. But the one half, Joe's coming back on Thursday, and we're going to do intricate cuts on there, and he's going to film it from several directions for the video series that we're doing. Okay, so let me see what I got here. Oh, not many people. Wow, only 12. What's going on here? Is President Biden giving a speech or something? All right. Inga's talking to you guys because she says lovely people. Let's talk biochar. Biochar is how you pronounce it if you're down from where Andy Zumwalt's from. They call it biochar. If you're up in New England, they call it biochar. Biochar. Okay. Can you explain the gas burning from the biochar? I take it that only happens when burning wood is in an enclosed unit. Very simply, we have the wood in an enclosed container on the inside of the retort. It's enclosed. The only opening is on the bottom. So it makes a seal on the bottom of the retort, and then we're putting all this heat into that wood. So we're basically roasting. You can do this. Haven actually did. He put some in a he put wood in a pressure cooker, and then he took the pressure cooker without the little weight on there, and then he put it on a campfire. So the wood that was in the pressure cooker got no direct flame, and then out that little port where you put the weight on a pressure cooker, out comes the gas. The biogas comes out of there. It's actually wood gas is what it is, but it's biogas. But this is being extracted with heat, where biogas is extracted via the bacterial action. It's little bacteria farts is what it is. Justin's with us. I've been wondering where you've been, son. And Keith's got an idea. I think this is a joke. I have an idea. Use the biogas to initiate the biochar for the plants. To initiate the biochar for the plants. Use the biogas. Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, to get it going. Maybe you could. Maybe you could. What we do, though, Keith, and I'll show you this Thursday night when I do a diagram of it. This design uses very little kindling wood. So it's quite simple to do. I'll draw it out for you so you can see it. But yeah, you could use the biogas as the fuel gas to get it going. And then once you get it going, the gas from inside the barrel circles around and lights off and creates more heat, which continues to gas off, the stuff that's in the inner retort. What's nice about that, as soon as there's no more distillates in the wood to gas off, as soon as it's gone, then the thing shuts down, which is really nice. So you can light it, walk away. I literally can look at it from a very far distance, and I can tell by the way that it's burning at what stage it's at. Okay, Nance is with us. Can someone educate me on how the biogas is produced? Does pressure from being enclosed make this happen like old steam engines? No, biogas, I think I kind of went through it. Biogas is a byproduct of bacteria chowing down on organic material. That's what it is. It's bacteria farts. There are many YouTube videos on biogas. Okay, well, get to building them. Right. And I'm going to go through it on Thursday night when I have the drawing pad out here. Coastal's with us. I feel like a newfie, always half hour late. Homemade biochar doesn't fund researchers. Yeah, it doesn't. Coastal says fecal soup. I don't think I will ever think of soup the same way now. Thanks, Mark. Fecal soup. That's a Joel Salatin thing. Fecal. Thumbs up. We need thumbs up. Okay. Luann's with us tonight. Ola Tribe, Mark Tribe, can't wait for a reply. Want to hear the whole conversation. Okay, a replay. Yeah. For your information, I'm going to be doing a biochar block at Tribe Day. So it's going to be me and Jim that do it. And probably what will happen is when you get here, no. We'll have some, I tell you what we'll do. We'll have the retort had burned the night before, and we open it up and take the inner barrel out, dump it so everybody can see it. And as everybody's looking through that, we will reload it, reload the retort, light it off, and then close it down. And then while we're talking about it, it'll start to gas off, and people get to see it burns really intensely. It really does. Okay. Nancy says my sister's interested in it, so probably do it together. Yeah, tune in Thursday night and see how we build the retort. It really helps out a lot if you don't have to make the mistakes. Why should you? Or I would reckon that you could find plans for it on the internet. Just the kind that once you light and then you have to stay with it for 5 hours. I don't know why you would do that. This one is you light it, you walk away. There is a lot of rhetoric. Last time I checked, it was a long time ago, about biochar from people that don't make biochar. I can tell you that, right? So you might want to just keep us on speed dial, right? So when you hear something, I heard from a guy that is one of the country's most premier biochar experts. He's told me to my face that you cannot scale up a 50-30. A 50-30 is when you use a 50-gallon barrel as the outer vessel and a 30-gallon barrel as the inner vessel. And I showed him one that I built, and he says, well, I don't think that's going to work because you can't scale that up. And back then, I mean, he was a guy in his 60s, and I was a guy that was not even 50. And I was just out of the military, and I didn't question people like I do now. Like, this guy spoke with authority. You know, he was a consultant on biochar, so I wasn't going to jack him up. But he said, you can't scale it up. And I did scale it up. And that is the generation 4 that we used for years. That's the one with the 3 stacks on it, called it Triceratops. And it worked really good. We were making 250 pounds of char at a burn, but it was tough to load. It was dangerous. It was self-destructing too, because it burned at a different rate than this new one that we have. So I think we had too much lightning holes in it. I think we had too much air holes in it, now that I look back on it. Because this one, we only have 4 holes, and Joe made those. And I said, I think you're going to need more than that. And he's like, well, let's try this. And we did. There was very little wear on the inner barrel, and the outer barrel, there was no wear on it. There was nothing on it, no wear at all from the intense heat. So I think, there's a point when you'd be too cool, but there's a point when you're too hot. And we might have just struck a good medium right there. Hey, maybe the way to do it is to be able to valve in your air supply. Okay. Drama Clean. Hey, Mark, we've been watching, just not commenting. We say biochar. Now, where are you from, Drama Clean? Where are you from? Biochar. That sounds kind of, no. New England is biochar. Okay, Justin, it isn't the amount of people, it's the message, and all the people will tell you to watch the video tomorrow. Yeah, hey, I'm over that, Justin. It doesn't matter how many. You get a bunch of trigger pullers, that's what you want. You can have a handful of trigger pullers, and that's all you need. Oh yeah, I did comment on. There's only 12 people. What? Audubon saying Joe is in bed. It's not the real guy. They changed him out. They had to. It's not the same guy. All right. Hey, Lone Star's with us. Right on. Where you been, Lone? Working on the ranch, I bet. Burning the wood gas to make the biochar makes it a very clean process. Tree huggers love it. Yeah, but they don't like us cutting the trees down in the first place. Actually, there's a lot to know about. Oh, that's right. Biochar. Lone made a beauty of a retort. This is a charcoal maker, right? So this is a retort that is designed for making charcoal. But there are others that look similar and still take advantage of the pyrolysis process, but they are controlled, right? They don't just, mine burns full on. And I suppose if I choke down the oxygen, I could slow it down. But and they actually, during World War II in London, they ran taxis on gas fires. So they're gasifying wood and using that gas, that wood gas, to run an internal combustion engine. And I know a guy in Cadillac that actually did it. I saw the videos. He happens to be a state policeman too. Okay, Lone says, my retort uses the wood gas to fuel the process, and I get liquid smoke as a byproduct. Yeah, they call that wood vinegar, and I don't know what that's good for. I think, like with mine, that it's burning full on, and we don't get any of that stuff. We don't. There's no creosote. There's no anything like that. It's just gone. All right. Lone says you can scale it up. I did. Yep. What, a 50-30? I certainly did. And then Audubon is saying LGB. Thank you. He's saying, look at the good boy. or little gay boy. All right. It's good fertilizer and insect spray. Boy, that's wicked smelling stuff. The gas that comes off, it's kind of grayish yellow, and it stinks. It really stinks. The boys, when they're doing a burn, they like to put that gas in a pipe, and then do certain things with it. Let's run it over here and then light it off. And, they made a burner, and then they took a frying pan out and they had the frying pan on top, and they were frying eggs out there and stuff. They like to do all that stuff. But one of them's jacket was sitting in the house last night, and I was like, what is that smell? And I go over and look at the wood stove. It smelled like it was creosoting up. It's just that wood gas smell, and that's what it was. Lone Star is saying, never suck in your off gas. And LOL, I'm here to tell you, okay, one time, I've done this twice. I did it on a silage bag, right? You see those big long bags that they blow silage into, and then my job at the end of the night was to put a vent in. So you have this plastic piece, and it's got these points on it, and you go over and you push it in and you turn it to the side, and then you pop the top off, and this gas comes out, and you can hear it coming out. And I assumed that the silage smells pretty good. It smells like fermenting cabbage, kind of. It smells pretty good. So I popped that thing out, and I went just to get a sniff of it, and that smell of that stuff went down into my lungs, and I could not get rid of it quick enough, right? And it bothered me for the entire drive home. And I wondered if have I killed myself? But then we were making biochar, and I had a pipe coming out on a flex line, and I wanted to see if I could capture some of this wood gas and see what I could do with it. And you have to compress it. You can't just put it in a bottle, right? But when it first started coming out, it was like this yellow grayish gas that's coming out real slow, and just, and I thought, oh, I bet you that smells good. I don't know why. And I just went like, oh, it burnt my nose bad, right down into my lungs, just the same. Yeah, terrible, terrible stuff. You got to be very careful with that stuff. So, how about we do a little research and figure out what the best way is. I know the guy to figure this one out would be Justin, but maybe Lone, you got it figured out too. How do we compress that wood gas and put it in a cylinder? And do we need to run it through a filter or a scrubber or something like that before we put it in a cylinder? So we might have to do some destructive testing, like fill a 100-pounder, let it sit for a year, then drain it out, cut the thing open, and see what kind of corrosion we have on the inside. I don't know. So propane is corrosive, but they scrub it and then they add something to it to keep it from being corrosive. And they actually, propane has no smell. They give it a smell. They give it that smell. So if you walk in your house and it's full of propane, you'll smell it. Okay, well, that's it. Tribe Day is coming up July 9th. We have a chicken processing day coming up. I don't have the date in front of me. That's going to be in May, I'm sure. We're getting chicks tomorrow. We're supposed to get them today, but they said they're going to ship tomorrow or the next day. So we maybe get them tomorrow. We still have milk shares if anybody's interested. $10 a share gets you a gallon of milk and all the petting and cow cuddling you can do, and you even get a share of manure if you want it for that. And there you go. Thanks everybody for coming by. Nice crowd. Wow, it pumped up. Got 17 people. But appreciate everybody coming by. Remember, anyone can farm. Please do us a solid. Give us a thumbs up. And please go to the Anyone Can Farm experience. Please subscribe and send it to all your friends. we're up at 300 people on there, and Joe tells me that's a good trajectory. All right, in 2 months ish. But if I get your help to share that with as many of your friends as you possibly can, that would be good. And the videos that he's making, he's putting a lot of time into them. And if you could share those too, that'd really help us out. So thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.